those of you who are new here, they're clapping for the outfit. It's not for me. I don't dress like this every Sunday, but it's a very special Sunday because of our guest speakers. So welcome. Welcome to the Ventura Center for Spiritual Living. It's wonderful to see all of you here on this beautiful morning. And so I invite you to just start to celebrate our time together and celebrate the presence of one another. Everybody greet one another. Say hello, get a handshake. Let us continue to breathe deeply and stay in that grace-filled place that we carry with us always, that Peter reminded us of so beautifully with his words. We breathe. We let go. We allow ourselves to simply be as we listen to the words of our sacred reading.
A message from Jalaluddin Rumi. Love is reckless, not reason. Reason seeks a profit. Love comes on strong, consuming herself, unabashed. Even in the midst of suffering, love proceeds like a millstone, hard-surfaced and straightforward. Having died of self-interest, she risks everything and asks for nothing. Love gambles away every gift God bestows. Without cause, God gave us being. Without cause, give it back again.
So in this spaciousness, in this place of causeless cause, where we give, where we love, where we receive for no reason, simply because the I am presence is expressing its fullness in us. Let us expand in our awareness of the I am, which is the name for spirit, which is the name for love, the name for God, higher power. And as we sing together, I am remembering who I am, let us allow that holiness, that wholeness, to work on us from the inside out. And let us also use this time to embrace the entire world with the knowledge that everything is the life of spirit.
Without cause, God gave us being. Without cause, God gave us the breath of life, filled with divine purpose. I ask you to bring special attention to that breath and that purpose that has been ordained for each of us with each breath that we take. With this breath, I thee wed, my true nature, my forever, my being. With this breath, I say yes, and I embrace that which is real within me. All that is great within me, all that is beautiful, all that is self-love and gratitude, and all that is divine. With this breath, I thee wed, my true nature, my forever, my being. With this breath, I say yes, and I embrace that which is real within me. And with each breath, I say yes, and I embrace, and I commit, and I pronounce that I am awake, and I am in love. I am in God now and forever.
Thank you so much to Dion and our wonderful band. Thank you. One of my favorite people in the whole world is here this morning to celebrate this Sunday with us. And I know I've spoken about him a lot, so without further ado, let's give a lot of Ventura love to Nipun Mehta.
It's on. It is your love that keeps me, I think there's a magnet that keeps pulling me here, so I'm so happy to be in your field of love. When Bonnie asked me, is that mic better? This is fine. When Bonnie said, what should we theme this morning? I said, one of the things I've been thinking about is humility. Just over the last year, it's very complicated to I will now give a talk on humility, But I've just met some incredibly humble people that have moved me not by their bigness, but by their smallness. In their presence, this is all through the last year, in their presence, I don't feel like, wow, I can go out and conquer the world. I feel like I want to be small. I feel like I want to be tiny. I feel like I want to be invisible. And that's very counter to the dominant paradigm sort of dream that is bestowed upon us these days. One of my friends, this is in the mid-90s, was with the Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama convened a gathering on compassion. And he called 40 leaders from around the world. And all these leaders would have these 5 days of dialogues. It became very famous. So one of my friends was there, and part of their morning ritual was for them to all sit down and gather, and then the Dalai Lama, being the host and also somebody who's very revered, would walk in last. And as he walks in, everybody would bow to him, as was the customary greeting. And then the Dalai Lama would bow to them. My friend noticed that the Dalai Lama was bowing at different heights. This much today, this much the day after. And so he's like, I wonder what's going on. So he was trying to catch, these smart people, they're always trying to figure out the model behind everything. So he's like, what's the deal? I mean, is there some? So he, on the 4th or 5th day, he's like, he got it. As he walked in, everybody bowed. And Dalai Lama looked at all of them and saw who bowed the lowest. And he always made sure to bow even lower than that person. In our world, we want to be the top, we want to be the king, we want to be the, have all the power. And yet it is these humble people who want to be at our feet, who want to be lower than dirt, as Gandhi would say. That's Google, just a few years back, they released this very interesting database of all 5.2 million books that have been written since the year 1500. So now you can search through all these books and see which words are, were in fashion, and then they kind of drop out of fashion. Things like kindness and humility dropped 56%. Right? Or kindness and helpfulness dropped 56%. Humility and modesty dropped 52%. We've kind of created this world where instead of going from me to we, we're going from we to me. This narcissism, they looked at empathy rates since 1980. And empathy was basically more or less the same, right? It would drop a little bit, but in the same spectrum. All of a sudden in the last decade, dropped 40%. And this might be good for the economy, right? Because narcissism is going to leave you feeling incomplete, so you have to go out and buy a lot of products, but it is not good for well-being. I think everyone knows that, everyone feels that, and we have to respond to that. And so I think there's a lot to let go of that kind of a dream and drop into that lower bow of the Dalai Lama, right? To drop into that space of humility. We've all heard these phrases. I mean, Jesus Christ said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Right? For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. We know that, we hear that, but it's very hard to practice it. I think the good news, though, is that I think there's a conspiracy of the universe to get us to practice this. So the farther off center we are, the greater the knocks we get from the universe. If you think you're going to try to conquer, last night we were talking about the Time magazine headlines like Google is trying to solve death, as if death is something to be solved, It's like, let's put an algorithm on everything. I mean, geez, But that's the world we live in. So I think the universe in all its kindness gives us these knocks, and people get these knocks in different ways. One of my friends, we had a retreat in India of a bunch of very interesting people from different sectors. And we said, what role does compassion, love, kindness play in your field? And so this guy, and we're a bunch of love monsters, right? So we were trying to express love in every little thing. So this guy's on the board of MIT's business school, has written various books and, established in that world. He travels, all the way to India, where we're having this retreat. And at the gate, here we are. We've got this big board which says, "Welcome home," right? And we're jumping up and smiling and ready to hug him and all that. And this guy's like, okay, what kind of platitude is this? This is not my home, this is a retreat center. Okay, fine, okay, I'll give you a hug. He does this whole thing. And we're just we really felt it. We were like, yeah, we can turn every place into home. It's a field of love. So he didn't really jive with it, And then we're like, okay, fine, different strokes for different people. And so we go on. And in India, you take off your shoes outside of every meeting room, and then you put them on, and then you go to the dining hall, you take them off, and you put them on, and so it's like this constant thing that happens. This guy didn't know about it, so he had like shoes and socks, right? So every time it's like, okay, take it off, take it on. Someone noticed that, and they, in his room, left a pair of flip-flops with a little smile card which says, "You don't know who did this? Pay it forward." Then it was time to take the shower the next morning, and he realized that he actually didn't bring a towel because this was like a grassroots retreat center, and so it's like, you bring your own towel, guys, But he's like, oh, I didn't bring a towel, and somebody left him a towel with a little smile card. We went to an offsite, and he had all these allergies, and he couldn't eat like onions and garlic and things. And so he's like, okay, well, these guys must have forgotten. Let me go tell the cooks. Right as he's going, they bring out the plate like, oh, we know that you have all these allergies, so this is for you. And we're like, he remembered. The third day, we're in circle, and this guy says, when I came in, I thought it was like these platitudes, welcome home. I realized that even in my real home, I'm not treated with this much love. And he says, I came in here as an expert. I came in here as somebody who knew things, but I'm leaving here as a beginner. I'm leaving here realizing I have a lot to learn. And that expansion of consciousness is what humility affords us. As soon as you think you know, you've got it, you've captured it, and you're the king of the hill, that's going to take you down a very narrow path. You're no longer open. My friend Feroz had a very amazing experience. He got a gift from the universe in the form of a son that changed his life. Feroz had a dream life, got married to his high school sweetheart, was working, did really great. His group was written up in Harvard Business Review. By the age of 36, he has 5,000 people under him, right, reporting in his group, all these people, and he was doing a lot of big things. Wife and him, at the age of 36, wife calls him, guess what, Feroz, we're going to be parents. They're super excited. Their son turns out to be on the autism spectrum. They were, as they said, for 2 weeks, they didn't know how to process it. And they said the question that kept coming back was, who is going to take care of our son when we are gone? Because society doesn't know what to do with people who are differently abled. And so they kept thinking. Then they found their life's purpose. They said, Feroz says, I want to change the world for Vivan. That's their son's name. And he says, my wife wants to change Vivan for the world. That became their life's purpose. And they started a whole bunch of different projects. But then at one point, he looks at his own community. He has 5,000 people, right, reporting to him, direct and indirect reports. I mean, that's a big group, right? So they have to solve problems. And so when you solve problems, you're looking at, well, what are my strengths? What can we do? And so he says, well, these are the strengths of these people, but is there a way that I can incorporate people on the autism spectrum? Because his son was autistic, so he's clearly starting to think in this way. So he says, well, what are their strengths? Nobody had asked this kind of question, because it turns out that if you're on the autism spectrum, if you're autistic, there are some amazing traits that you cultivate, that you have. You never get bored. I mean, geez, who doesn't want staff that never gets bored? Hey, do this, and you just keep doing it. You never lie. Wow. Right? So they looked at all these strengths, and they said, can we restructure the problem so we can utilize their strengths? They did that. They hired 5 people on the autism spectrum, created a huge ripple. This was at a big company. CEO of the company finds out and says they have 65,000 staff at this company, SAP. And so they find out, and his CEO's like, this is amazing. He makes a public pledge by 2020, I want 1% of our staff to be on the autism spectrum. And Feroz, as he's telling me the story, he almost has tears in his eyes, because he says, the way I heard it was someone walked into my office and he says, Feroz, your son has just created 650 jobs today. And that happened because he realized that everyone is good at something. And that idea that everyone has something to contribute is rooted in a sense of humility. Because if you're just looking for me and mine and everyone who's going to further my aim, you wouldn't quite think of the context. You would miss the context, and with missing the context, you miss so many gifts. So, and this happens in so many different ways. One of my friends did it with animals. This guy, I know we have a bunch of animal fans here, so I thought I'd like throw in an animal story. This guy, Steve Carlin, he just has this natural affinity to animals. And then he found his life's calling. He says, I'm going to take care of broken, wounded animals. And I'm going to have them serve wounded human beings. Wow, what an idea. And you're like, what do you mean? How? How does he do it? So he takes these kids. My wife saw this. This is a first-hand story. So he'll take, like, there was a condor, this vulture size with a 7-foot wingspan, this huge condor. And it had no habitat to kind of stay in. And so Steve has a space where he's able to host so many different kinds of animals and birds and all kinds of wildlife. And he says, well, everyone has a gift. Everyone is good at something. So they bring these kids who the dominant system doesn't know what to do with these kids. They bring them and they said, okay, now we're going to hold circle with a condor. You're like, okay, well, a condor is not really speaking English, How are you going to hold circle with a condor? Well, this is the instructions to the kid. You go up, everyone holds silence. Condor is there, just like everybody else. You stand up, you go look at the condor. You interact, you ask your question, and you go sit down. And you're like, okay, well, that's kind of a tricky thing. I mean, it sounds like a mind play thing, right? But these kids are not really thinking, they're not really intellectualizing it. They're going with an experience. So they actually go up. And there's this one kid, when my wife was there, he goes up. It's his turn. He goes up, looks at the condor, looks him in the eye. And he goes back down. And he's almost like teary-eyed. And he goes back, and as he's going back, he's like, wait, I didn't catch all of it. And repeatedly, he's able to see that. With so many, not just the condor. There's this amazing story with a horse. He calls him Thunder, the horse. And this horse was a healer, but wounded from a traditional paradigm. He was wounded. Steve would take care of him, but he would still be able to heal people in incredible ways. There was this one kid who's like 6 feet tall. And whenever he would walk in, people would just clear out. It was like amazing to watch in one way. So this kid's walking, and all of a sudden, no one wants to be around him in his periphery. It just kind of clears out. And Steve's like, what's going on? Turns out that this guy's been abused practically every day of his life, told that he's worthless, and he just goes into these fits of anger, and he was way bigger than the other kids. He just starts punching people. So none of the kids want to be around him. He comes to Steve's place, and Steve says, I think he needs to connect with Thunder the horse. He's like, okay, well, how do you have to engage with him? And so Steve kind of calls him out. He knew his story, and he's putting his shoes on, and he says, oh, by the way, yeah, and he had Thunder right next to him. He's like, can you just hold on to the reins here real quick while I tie my shoes? And he's like, all right, sure. Yeah, so he's doing this, he's holding on to the reins. And then he's like, why is he looking at me? That kid is telling Steve, why is the horse looking at me? He's like, wow. Well, I don't know. Maybe the horse likes you. Steve's still doing his thing. He's like, no, he doesn't. And he kind of goes, looks at him. He's still feeling it out. He's like, I don't know what to make of this horse. And he's like, why don't you guys go for a little walk? And, he's thinking about it. Steve's like, okay, I'll go with you. And then they walk, and they're walking. And at some point, this kid looks at the horse and is like, you following me? And he looks at Steve, and Steve's like, I think he likes you. And he's like, no, he doesn't. And they go back, and he's like, well, why don't you just stop and spend some time with the horse? And they stop. He looks the horse in the eye, and the horse Thunder just buries his head into this kid's heart. And the kid just starts bawling. Steve sees this, and Steve asks, is everything okay? He says, I've never been loved like that. In one way, you can say that this horse, this condor, they're wounded people, and it's baggage to kind of take care of them. You can look at these kids and say, they're wounded kids, and it's baggage, but they all have their gifts. But to see their gifts, we need to change the lens through which we look at the world. And if we're able to be humble, if we're able to bow like the Dalai Lama low, even lower than low, then we are afforded this capacity to see. So I just want to say, and maybe end. Should I tell you one more story? What's the time? Bonnie's like, forget about time. We got them. Doors are locked. No one can leave. It's like captive audience. Half of them are crying. Just go with it. I think that as we walk down this path of humility, oh, hello, good peoples up there. First thing we expand into is this power of many. We realize power of ego is very isolating. And as we let go my ego, that could be a title of this talk, let go my ego. As we let go of our ego, we tap into this power of many. And as we let go of our ego even further, as we become even humbler, we go from power of many to the power of one. Where power of many taught us that everybody is good at something, power of one teaches us that everyone actually has a capacity to transform themselves. And that capacity for inner transformation is incredibly powerful. And as you tap into that power of one, you ultimately get into the power of zero, power of being nothing. You know, in India, we would grow up in like schools and stuff, singing this prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. It's slightly different words, but it's like, make me a channel of your peace. We have the choir, so I won't sing, but it's a beautiful prayer, right? But it's the famous prayer that I think most of you would know. But it didn't say, make me a CEO of your peace, you know. It didn't say, make me the boss, right? It says, make me a channel, make me an instrument, have me be so empty that you can flow through me, right? That the divine can flow through me, that the goodness, dharma, whatever, Tao, however you want to frame it, that can flow through. And I think that's the power of zero. That's incredible. So I think as you start to walk down this path of humility, we realize that everyone is good at something, that everyone can be great at giving, every single person. And that ultimately, with the power of zero, that everyone is connected to everything. Now, can you imagine going around doing a lot of this work just with that idea that everyone is connected to everything, that one small encounter I have with the person at the door or that one conversation is actually connected to how everything else in the universe works. Right? If you hold if you actually hold yourself with that mindset, life becomes incredibly powerful. And if we look at these social change giants. I do a lot of social change work, so I look at these people who have created incredible change in the world, and I say, well, what's their secret? And if you look at history books, they tell you a certain part of their secret, but what you don't hear are these stories of humility, because they don't fit into this. It's not a sellable story, you know. It's not the 5 secrets of Cesar Chavez, you know. But you see them. So I'll tell you a Cesar Chavez story to end. And I have a prayer to end. Cesar Chavez was, I think most of you know of him, right? So I don't need to tell you more about him. He's a social change giant in so many ways. The year is 1966. First time the United Farm Workers are up against the Giorgio Corporation, largest corporation for table grapes in the country. So they had this whole thing about farm rights of the farmers, right? And they were going back and forth. And it looked like the farmers were not really going to get any headway into this. They had this election, but in the election, they needed everyone's voices to be heard. Now, the farmers are all behind this walled garden. Like, they're all in these camps, so to speak. They actually had watchtowers. It's very like World War II-like. Right? They had these watchtowers so they couldn't leave, and if they can't leave, they can't learn about the issues. If they can't learn about the issues, they can't vote. If they can't vote, okay, we have elections, but we're going to lose. So they knew that it was looking very bleak. Nothing was happening. They're all in this circle. Cesar himself had like sort of given up. And he's like, okay, well, what should we do? You know, and everyone had gathered in a community hall like this. And everyone kind of has their ideas, and other people are batting it down. And then there's this one woman in the back. She's a janitor. She has a rebozo on, this Mexican shawl. And she raises her hand and she says, you know, I don't have very complex ideas, but I just know that when I'm at a dead end, you know what I do? I pray. And everyone's like, all right, well, yeah, that's kind of sweet idea, but, you know, all right, let's move on to other ideas, you know. And it kind of, but Cesar, if you're humble, you would see and you know how to discern these things. He says, no, there's something there. They start talking, and she says, well, where should we pray? Well, we don't have an altar or anything. And Cesar's like, well, yeah, I've got a little statue in the trunk of my car. So they go out, pops open the hood, there's a statue, right? And they all start holding vigil. Now, because they're holding vigil, you can't like stop the farm workers from crossing the line to go pray, right? They have to come out. It's like, yeah, I'm going to go pray. I'm not going for like some, you know, revolution. No, I'm just going. And they all start coming. And as they come through word of mouth, they start sharing, oh yeah, you should do this. And you should, you know, did you know about this issue? And did you know about this fact? They ended up winning. It was the first time in their movement they actually defeated a corporation. It ended up being a major turning point, all because this one woman in the back says, you know, I'm just a simple person. I don't have any strategies. I don't have any business models, but I could just tell you that I pray, and that prayer ended up bringing everybody together. But it was Cesar Chavez's humility to say that I'm going to listen to all these voices, and not just all these voices, even the simple ones, even the ones that have never spoken up in a meeting, even the ones that shyly raise their hand and say, I have something to add. He saw value. He assumed value in everything. And that is an example, that is the power of humility. So I want to end with a poem that I heard from a very humble man. This guy was a 96-year-old Sufi. I met him randomly, and he just moved me. Like, I can't even tell you how. It was, I just wanted to be small. I just wanted to be unnoticeable. I just wanted to be invisible in his presence, because he was being even more invisible than me. And he was just being more smaller than me, no matter how hard I tried. I was like, oh, I'm gonna, you know. And at one point, I was just so moved, and I said, you know, Dada, I said, how can I be of service? And this man who had once met me, he had met me once with like thousands of people, and he called me to sit next to him, and I was like, all right, you know, they do that all the time. And so you know, then the second time I meet him, I was like, yeah, we actually met that one time. And he looks at me, he says, we have met many times. I was like, all right, yeah, okay, my memory is kind of bad anyway, so I was just like, so I'm going to him, and I'm like, yeah, you know, like, how can I was just so moved by so much of who he was. And I said, how can I be of service? And he cups his hands. Imagine a 96-year-old guy with a hunchback cupping his hands and saying, I seek your tears of compassion. Oh, man, I didn't know what to say, you know. And I knew he was friends with the Dalai Lama, and so I was like, all right, I need, you know, and we're from, like, this very busy mind, right? So we're like, as soon as there's a gap of, like, 20 seconds, you're like, okay, I need to say something, you know? And it's like, you know, but he was totally fine. He was just, like, with locked eyes, and I told him, I said, what do you think of this idea of a bodhisattva? And he says, bodhisattvas are beings that, you know, forsake their liberation just out of compassion to serve other people. And I said, what do you think about that? Because it seemed to me that he had those qualities, at least that's how I felt in that moment. And he's looking at me eye to eye with this deep silence. I'm just trying to break the silence because I'm not used to like extended period of silence with anybody. And I was just like feeling very overwhelmed, actually. with goodness. And he looks at me and he says, he recites this prayer word for word, like just eye to eye. He had it memorized. It's a prayer from a 14th century poet, Shantideva. And it says, may I be a guard for those who need protection, a guide for those on the path, a boat, a raft, a bridge for those who wish to cross the flood. May I be a lamp in the darkness, a resting place for the weary, a healing medicine for all who are sick, a vase of plenty, a tree of miracles. And for the boundless multitude of living beings, may I bring sustenance and awakening, enduring like the earth and the sky, until all living beings are freed from sorrow and all are awakened. May I be that instrument. I was so moved then and now just by that thought that I want to be the last person out. The whole planet, all life, let them take as long as it takes. I want to be the last one. I want to support you. I want to be the bogey behind your engines. So powerful. If you were to give me a choice between conquering the world and actually being that last, I want to be last. And I hope all of you join me in being last. Thank you very much.
Shall we have a group sniffle and nose blow? So beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Let's turn within and just anchor all of that in prayer. And as we breathe together, we move into that space that is beyond words. That wordless word that sprang to life one day and created all of us. And that lives and moves and has its perfect being in every single detail of our lives. Today I welcome the knowing that we are one with that power and with that presence, with that grace, with that humility. And together, I trust that our hearts have opened this morning to a new perspective, a deeper perspective, a different way of being in the world, a way that engages the heart, a way that shares the highest and the best, and in a way that is willing to be last. And so I bless this time together, and I give thanks for it. I give thanks for all of the transformation and for the opening that I know has occurred through our spiritual community here today. I give thanks for this small and simple morning that undoubtedly has ripples emanating from it that reach around the world to bless all beings, living beyond the veil, animate, inanimate, all plants, all rocks, all planets. Let us be that beautiful essence that we wish to see in the world, and let us be in a constant state of gratitude. And so as I am grateful for this gathering this morning, I bless all gatherings, all paths to God. I bless churches, synagogues, temples, mosques, and ashrams. I bless fundamentalists and atheists, knowing that everyone is a blessing in their own unique and wonderful way. I bless this time together and name it good. And most of all, I give thanks for love that assembled us here today by divine appointment to show up and change us from the inside out so that we might be that change that we wish to see in all beings. So with a heart that is filled to overflowing, I say, thank you, Spirit, thank you, God, and I release these words into the mystery. And together we say, and so it is.
It's so great to be back here. I tell you, it's been, I think, 3 years, and what a way to be welcomed back into this space. I'd love to give some more love to this wonderful band. You all are spoiled. You get to enjoy them every week, and they are terrific. Thank you, as always. I'd like to do one that is gifted to us by Mr. John Cross over there, who wrote this and called me about a week later and said, I've got something for you to hear. I'd like for you to do it. And it's a song called Ever Sometimes. Here we go. How can I ever look up, turn around and face my own fate, and greet each day with open heart, make a wish and send it forth, always knowing it could fail? I think of melodies that speak of power and love. How can I ever, how can I ever, how could I ever, what is forever? How could I ever know? And how could I ever plant a seed, not knowing how well it will grow? Can I ever just believe, keep the faith and quell all my doubts?